Welcome to the podcast. Got a great episode today here with Grant Skeldon of Q Ideas. He's the author of the book Passion Generation, the seamlessly reckless, definitively disruptive, but far beyond hopeless millennials. And I got introduced to Grant 3 or 4 years ago. I was like one of the few young guys in the room, one of the few millennials as he spoke to a group of boomers. But yeah, and that was kind of my introduction to you, Grant. And I don't know if you still see yourself this way, but as a bridge builder, we definitely in our culture, we have divides in multiple ways, but one that's probably not talked about as much is the generational divide. Mm-hmm. And would you consider yourself that bridge?
Yeah, I do think, I think millennials in this season would be wise, or just be wise if you care about more than just like your generation or yourself, but care about the overall impact of the kingdom. It'd be really great if millennials as a whole shifted their posture towards not saying, hey, we're not the next generation, or we're irrelevant, or this Gen Z group, or critiquing Gen Z, which is kind of what every generation does to the next upcoming generation.
Right.
Especially once I think they get displaced as not the new young generation, which is kind of right now that's happening. The older generation, the oldest version of Gen Z is starting to become adults, have purchasing power, maybe starting to have some seats at the table. And it would be very easy for millennials like Saul to kind of feel insecure about that, and to feel like, man, David's starting to get the credit here. And instead, I think, man, what if millennials could be healthy, secure versions of Saul that think, I wish I was given what I want to give you what I wish I was given, basically. Like, I'm not challenged by you. We're on the same team. I want you to get further, faster, even faster than I got at your age. And so that's kind of been my hope and my shift as I hit 30-ish or 30. And I just now feel like, what if, especially if we're talking about the kingdom, I just don't think we have the luxury to allow this trend that happens, especially in the church, where we only start really focusing on the next generation once it's too late and they've already moved out, they've already left church, and then we start sounding the alarm and saying, we got to reach this generation, rather than when they're in our homes, they're under our influence, they're in the church still. And so for millennials, I think the very sweet spot that we have is we are like the older brother, the older sister. We're not like mom and dad to Gen Z or their grandpa or grandma. But and what that means is, as the older brother and older sister, that role tends to be a little bit more trusted by dad and mom. And so you kind of use this word, Carl, is the bridge builder. I feel like millennials have they have more trust than Gen Z by the older generation, but they can also relate to Gen Z more than the older generation. And so what I think would be great is if we could get older people who tend to have money, power, influence to invest earlier in Gen Z, but also get Gen Z, as we're a bridge builder, to show earlier honor, hunger, respect for the older generation, and be a bridge builder for both.
Yeah. So, that's interesting, because I really want to dive in your story, Grant, and really what led you, but you kind of perked my curiosity. So, what are your thoughts? I feel like as Christians, we and unfortunately in the West, we've come where we're being led by culture, and that's part of some of the divide. And should we, what are your thoughts on, as Christians, shouldn't we be leading in this capacity? Leading, like, we should be the model for how to lead younger generations, how to really engage and grow. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting as you're talking, like how we can kind of follow along with culture and have this divide is created when we should be leading in this and modeling this.
Yeah, it's very normal, and has been normal for generations, to make fun of or critique the younger generation. And I especially I don't mean like middle school and high school
Mhm.
I more mean especially young singles. It's like post high
Yeah.
school, pre marriage, that generation. And yeah, we could critique their work ethic. We could critique their lack of faith. We could critique
Mhm.
their lack of involvement in the direction of our nation. We
Mhm.
could critique what they prioritize that we just don't think is that important.
Mhm.
All these different things that we see over and over again, every industry, from the marketplace to,
Mhm.
yeah, just all these different groups. Um, but I do feel like the church, unfortunately, isn't that different when it comes to like the people of God. I mean, the institution, but the people of God, Christians, are not that different in their posture towards the next generation than
Mhm.
the rest of the world.
Right.
By and large, it's a culture of critique or at least sarcasm
Yeah.
towards young people instead of, and unfortunately, despite the fact that like what could be the distinguishing mark of Christians is this idea that we're actually supposed to disciple the next generation. That our founder of our faith literally took the form of man, God
Mhm.
becoming Jesus, and literally, if you looked at top 10 list of what did Jesus prioritize, um, I mean, I think top three's got to be discipleship. Like 90% of, I mean, if you think about it, we don't even know what Jesus was doing
Mhm.
until he started making disciples. Like 30 years he's on earth, and we don't know anything about him other than one story about when he was 12 and got away from his parents. Other than that one story for decades, we do not know what he's doing. And then like everything changes and we get a whole bunch of documentation on his life once he starts making disciples. I mean,
Yeah.
he fasts for 40 days, he comes back and immediately he starts his ministry by finding disciples, and he ends his ministry with his disciples, and the
Mhm.
ministry, I would even say, continues because of his disciples. I would go so far to say you could take everything out of Jesus' story. Sorry, you could, there's a lot of things you could take out of Jesus' story, like feeding 5,000. And I think it wouldn't change where we are today. Like him feeding the 5,000, him walking on water isn't absolutely necessary. Him raising Lazarus from the grave, very important, like very powerful into our faith. But like, I just think if you were to take this piece out of the story, of course, the gospel is the most important part. But if you take the disciples out of Jesus' story, like if you said Jesus did every single thing we know him to do, except he never discipled 12 guys for 3 years while he did those things for three
Yeah.
years, I think that highly impacts
Mhm.
us literally being here today and our faith, because he eventually leaves. He would technically, in this scenario, would still have salvation offered to all mankind, just no one to go tell anyone about it. No one committed enough to do it because the 5,000 were nowhere to be found at that point. We didn't see all these individuals who he had impacted. A lot of it hinged on the disciples. And so I guess my point is, for a people that are marked by a founder that started his ministry by discipleship, ended his ministry, and his last words being "Go and make disciples," and everything hinging on discipleship, you would think that those Christians would not speak criticism or sarcasm over the next generation. But I think, what if the church and their people of God were like the ones who were so marked by being the people that invested in the next generation, believed in the next generation, raised up some of the best amongst the next generation, were distinguished. Like when young Christians got a job somewhere or interviewed somewhere, they're like, that, I don't believe with everything that Christians believe, but you got to admit, when you hire a young Christian, they just got ethics that's different. They got maturity that's different. They got like, they go above and beyond that's different. They got a respect and honor for elders. We
Mhm.
know that they've been invested in. They didn't just live this same life as everybody else. There's a unique nature of young Christians. I do think that that's possible, and I do would hope that that would be the case in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the word discipleship. I mean, just reading your book, that's the word that just jumps off the page. Um, and it's such a powerful word because you're right. Like I was sitting there thinking, like, yeah, Jesus' priority was never about being right. And I've even found my own criticism when I criticize the Gen Zers, like my way is right. And I think that if we as Christians can start even just starting there, that maybe I can actually by being right, I put myself above them instead of being where I'm next to them, discipling, growing, putting that down where I can interact and love. And so that's man, we could pick that. But I really wanted, my first general question I ask all my guests is, who were your early influences? Who kind of defined in your mind, whether good or bad, what made you today, whether that's success, manhood, whatever.
Yeah.
So.
If I had to pick 3, so I'm just gonna overarch this because 2 of them are not even real people.
Really?
Yeah. The biggest influence in a Christian level is definitely like old school classic missionaries and
Mhm.
revivalists and preachers. Like William Wilberforce was highly influential in my life. Let's see,
Yeah, that's probably.
George Mueller was huge on my life for prayer. Any missionary like C.T. Studd or William Carey or
Huh.
just all that generation of missionaries. I mean, what they sacrificed and gave in order to just this unswerving devotion to the lost and to go to hard places and not caring about their name is very inspirational to me. However, the 3 that I don't know when I thought in the moment who came to mind, it was George Bailey, Charles Spurgeon, and Professor X from the X-Men.
George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. Is that what you're talking
Yeah, that'd probably be number 1, man. That'd probably be number 1. Um,
about?
so that's my favorite movie in the world. I hate that it's only like a Christmas movie. I hate that most
Right?
young people have never really seen it. It is a long movie. It is in black and white. It's very old school. Um, but I just think that guy is a great example of a local missionary or just a faithful Christian.
Mm,
So many young people, especially, can't. They're always on transitioning. They're always changing. They're always moving. They're always quitting and starting something new. They always feel like they got to leave in order to make a difference. Probably one of the biggest
mm,
drives for young people
yeah.
of like this idea of I'm getting anxious. Like I'm not seeing the impact I want to make. I need to go somewhere else. I think God's calling me to a different job or a different church or a
Mm,
different city. Or they're always always starting with a new ladder and putting it on a new wall, and they never even get to see what's at the top because they already changed the next ladder, the next ladder, the next
yeah.
ladder. And I felt like George Bailey was a good example of that in that movie of just someone. And I saw it senior year of high school, and I was like, "This movie is awesome!" Like it was in my theater class. I don't know why we watched it, but I'm so thankful we did.
Yeah.
We just watched it all class, and I really think he just took a break. He's like, "We're gonna watch this classic theater movie." I guess I don't know how he tied it in, but it wasn't even Christmas time. But I watch it, and I'm just like, man, he is young. He can't wait to get out of his small town so he can go change the world. He
Mm,
has this desire to be a part of something bigger than himself. And I thought that's just like young people today. Um, and unfortunately, he never gets to leave. So every
mm,
part of his story, he keeps having to stay local. He keeps having to help take responsibility. And he begrudgingly stays in that town for what seems to be decades. And then at the end of the movie, some really bad circumstances happen and he gets in the situation where he kind of makes a wish where he's like, I wish I was never born. and
mm,
and an angel actually grants that wish where he gets to
mm.
see what his life looks like
Good
and what
old
his city
Clarence.
looks like if he was never born. Yeah, and I thought, man, yeah, I mean, there's one dude who didn't even enjoy his life in that city. Like
Mm,
but he just despised it so much.
mm,
Still made such an impact in his city. Like his whole city is different. His friends are different. His family's different. His brother, actually, I mean, doesn't even make it because he wasn't there to save him. And I just thought, man, that's like the dude was like really faithful. Like that is the great scorecard. Is the question: if you got taken out of your job, how much would it make a dent in your job, in the community, and the culture? If you
mm.
took taken out of your church, how much would it take a dent in the culture of your church? Would it, people even notice, or would it be like, yo, there's a massive gap here now that we don't have this person? How much would it impact your city even? And I just think if even if you had 100 Christians that lived at that level in each major city, it would change a nation. If you had 100 people that lived at such a level that you take them out of that story of that city, and it's like drastically different. And so that's kind of been very inspirational for me to like, and he was just a man of the city. And so I try, a
Yeah.
lot of what I do is convene people. That's where like Professor X plays in, is kind of like I told you, I do
Bringing
retreats
everybody
for
in.
high
Yeah.
caliber young Christian leaders. So yeah, I'm always looking for young Christians that have unique talents that the church maybe doesn't know what to do with, or it's like, yes, they could serve or they could sing or they could do parking team, but
Mhm.
this person's an Olympic athlete. Like there's other things they could be trained in, or this person's a top 10 on American Idol. Like there's other things that person could also be doing. And I know it's quick to say, let's get them to do worship. But I like, let's get them to do whatever they're doing, God's calling them to outside of the church. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, pour into them and train them and equip them.
That's cool. Yeah, no man is a failure who has friends. That's what Captain
Yeah.
told me that. That's like
Yeah.
at the end of that movie when he opens up the Bible and sees that. That's really good. Um, are you a big fan? Have you watched any other Frank Capra movies? You know, that's the
I haven't. No, I haven't. I know his thing is like he always has birds, I guess, in the movie. But
yeah.
I need to watch. I do need to watch. I mean, tell me, yeah, whatever the top other
Well,
two
one
or
is
three you
you
would.
can't take it with you,
Okay.
and Mr. Potter from the bad guy in It's a Wonderful Life actually plays like the dad who's a good guy. It's really weird seeing him in like as a good guy role and that you can't take it with you. And then the one other big one was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Have you heard that? That
Yeah.
was another Jimmy Stewart.
I've
Anyway,
heard of that one. I've never watched it. Yeah, I'll try Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I mean, similar narratives, similar, just like, really deep, meaningful stuff that also
Yeah.
has a lot of comedy and, so it's good. But yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah. I mean, that's my family, we watch every Christmas, just because it's such a good story.
Yeah.
I want to live again. And you see, yeah, we have no idea the impact we really have. And I wonder if we get to heaven, we're really going to actually see it. And so that's just an interesting
Yeah.
thought. But
Yeah.
yeah. So man, so you saw that senior year of high school. How much of a catalyst was that to your next decisions into the next stage of your life? Did you go to college? What was kind of after high school?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I went to college. I wouldn't say college played much into my life.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing that played into the next couple of years is I started a nonprofit with one of my best friends, who's significant. He's several years older than me, but with that nonprofit called Breakdown Ministries, we would help churches do local mission projects, and that's where I kind of, I guess, cut my teeth and got experience in leadership, experience leading a team, experience especially building relationships with churches across the city of Dallas. And kind of going back to George Bailey, it's where I also developed and enlarged my heart for my city and thought like, man, what if I could like really impact Dallas? And honestly, man, until a year ago, I thought I'd be in Dallas the rest of my life. And that was kind of like a goal. It wasn't something I wanted to idolize. I had to stay in Dallas, but I always thought if I did stay in Dallas the rest of my life, unlike George Bailey, I want to joyfully be like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's see what happens in the next 40 years. So I was a little surprised when God kind of did call me. I felt like to merge my organization to what's going on here with Gabe Lyons and Rebecca Lyons with Q Ideas in Nashville. But I have seen just in the 10 months how much more me and him can do together as we are now at a whole new level, gathering just a community of high caliber young Christians and giving them a refuge of community, giving them training and development they would just never get otherwise. And
Yeah.
um, also making sure they just don't feel like they're in this alone. Many of them are representing Christ in darker or harder parts of culture where it's just not popular or uh, likable when you are a believer. And them having to navigate that, it helps when you meet others that are like in those same type of situations or industries or scenarios.
That's cool. Yeah. So, I mean, so you said you're 32,
One.
31. Okay.
Mhm.
Just turned 30. Yeah. So what was kind of your big, uh, turning points or revelations in your 20s that really, kind of led you to who you are today?
Revelations in my
So you
20s.
started how old were you when you started that nonprofit?
I was like 20.
You're 20,
Yeah.
and that is that nonprofit. Did y'all transfer that to Q Ideas, or y'all still kind of run that?
Yeah, sorry. And I can try to be more like, hey, this
Yeah,
is the process. I don't know if it's kind
yeah.
of like
So
how it goes,
sometimes
but
I
it's
like the chronological. It kind of
yeah,
helps
yeah,
put me in mind. I mean, but
yeah,
man, feel free to rip whatever. So
yeah. So I'd say so I did that ministry from
Mhm.
college to uh years later, and around 24 years old, I started a new organization. And kind of roles reversed, and ironically, where I dropped out of college and I actually was let go from that nonprofit I had helped do because I was young. I was 23, and the board actually let me go because they felt like I was giving away, I was going to hurt my future by leaving college and pursuing more ministry. But I just felt like I wasn't learning that much in college, and I was
yeah.
learning so much from this ministry that I dropped out and thought I was going to be able to give more time to the nonprofit. But then within 2 weeks, the nonprofit and the elder, or like the board, let me go, saying like, "Hey, we love you. We love how much you're like believe in this, but you're giving we think you're making a mistake that could hurt your future by dropping out of college so that you can do this. We feel like we again love how much you want to change
Mhm.
things and impact things, but we feel like it'd be bad stewardship for us to enable you to keep like, yeah, we'd hate for you to be like 35, 40, 50 and be like, oh, I don't have a college degree because in my early 20s I
Yeah.
left college so I can do ministry. Which now I understand at the time was like, this stinks. Like now I'm not in college, and that which took up a lot of my time, and I'm not helping with this nonprofit, which took up the rest of my time.
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, within about a couple months, he kind of got open a door for me to help with a big conference coming to Dallas that Tim Keller was a pretty big part of, and that was the first time I got asked to do two things. One, get a lot of young people to go to a big event. I just never did that before, but I knew a lot of young people, and that's where I realized even more how much influential and convening power I think God gave me. And second, hundreds ended up going through me, and especially several of my influential friends that I just got, about 20 of us said, hey, can you help me get people there? It's free. It's a legit conference, trying
Yeah.
to change the city of Dallas. And then two, that was the first time I ever got asked to speak on the next generation. And so I was
Ah.
24 years old, and 2 days before I got asked to speak at the event. And I think they realized that they didn't have anyone young speaking at the event, but they said they wanted young people. And so they threw me on a panel. And
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, everyone was wearing suits and ties. Like it was supposed to be the millennial panel, but nobody on the panel was a millennial. They just like influenced millennials. And so I think they realized like, dang, we can't do a millennial panel, have hundreds of millennials there and not have a millennial on the panel. So since I
Right.
was part of inviting all those leaders, they let me be on the panel. And I don't even think I was in the printout. Like it was such a last second decision.
Hmm.
But yeah, God used it a lot. I was honestly going to go in kind of probably, I wouldn't even say cocky. I would just say convicting. I was going to
Yeah.
go in and try to be like, hey, there's like 30 or 40 speakers here, and you guys, I felt this pressure of I need to represent the next generation because no
Yeah.
one else on this conference is. And I was going to call out how they always say we are a participation trophy, kids, and all that. When I held at that time, 24, I hated that. Every time you brought up
Mhm.
millennial, they're like, oh, participation trophies, participation trophies. And I
Y'all the
thought it was
ones
like
who
the
made them up. We didn't give them to
yeah,
ourselves.
exactly. Exactly. I was just like, this is the dumbest argument. It's like, just
Yeah.
do the math. But I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about how no one older disciples, but you guys expect us to be mature. And you guys, if I
Mm.
ask like all of you guys, raise your hand if you actually disciple someone regularly right now in your life.
Boom.
And I know statistically, like
Mhm.
95% of them would not raise their hand. And I was just gonna call them out and be like, I felt like the culture was very critical towards millennials. It
Yeah.
was. But God really convicted me to the point of feeling like a pit in my stomach the day before that I should not go in like that. And I just felt convicted by him that I needed to go in humble, even if how they had treated a generation was poor. that I needed to go and humble, and that basically that guilt doesn't change anyone permanently, only like Holy Spirit inspiration does.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just kind of shared how I was very impacted by discipleship 2 weeks after I got saved, and I was very lucky to have a man pour into me so quickly. That wasn't my father, because my dad's not a believer, and how almost every season of my life I've had someone older pour into me. And part of that is because guys have sought me out, and so part of that is because I've sought them out. But I just feel like I'm the exception to the norm. And that's why I feel different, is because I had people disciple me, and just shared how the best young people I know were discipled or mentored at least.
Mm.
And just said, hey, we need y'all. And then I did joke. I actually, instead of making fun of them, I made fun of millennials too, which it's like great to connect with older people. They love when you make fun of your own generation.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I remember I talked about how I said, you guys are waiting for young people to be mature, and then you'll pour into them, or then you'll give them a seat at the table. And I was like, that's just not what happens. I was like,
Yeah.
that's also not what Jesus did. Like, if Jesus waited till the disciples were mature, like
Yeah.
these guys were falling asleep while he was praying. These guys were cutting people's ears off. They were like trying to argue for the left hand and the right hand of the Father. I mean, James and John, their mom got involved and asked for them. That's like
Right.
so millennial. Is you like get your mom to come to the interview, or like try to
The most
talk on your
immature
behalf.
thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, you guys are acting like we're supposed to be different than what's always been.
Right.
And I was like, and just mind you, these guys are like deserting him and cutting people's
Mhm.
ears off on 3 years in. It's not even
Mhm.
like in the beginning, because the mentality back then, it's probably still is kind of like, okay, we'll give young people a chance. We'll like let them be a janitor and do all the stuff nobody wants to do. And if he's humble about that for a year, maybe we'll let him have opportunity. And I'm not against, like, I guess, testing humility in some way and teaching humility. I just felt like Jesus didn't do a lot of that. Kind of he just took
Yeah.
what he had and he just thrusted them into leadership,
Mhm.
and that matured them. I think I know in my story, getting thrust into leadership forced me to rely on God more, to pray to God more, to
Yeah.
read, because I was like, I want to be able to handle the responsibilities given to me. And I personally think it's because we're so slow to give responsibility to young people. Then
Mm.
they're so slow to step up to the plate. They have no urgency under them to do that. And so
Yeah.
anyway, it went well, and I started getting invited all over to speak. And that, to this
Yeah.
day, I've never had an agent. I'll speak at something, and I'll get invited to something else. And
Mhm.
now, since the book, I get, yeah, people that will reach out and to speak. But that was definitely the tipping point. I think I got about 15 speaking opportunities within the next 2 months from just that panel, ironically. And that's what started gathering next gen leaders after that conference. And that's what started speaking about the next generation, mostly to older people. I do not speak that often, ironically, to young people.
Right.
I'm supposed to next week in Dallas, and honestly, I'm a little nervous. But if I was speaking to CEOs or business leaders or
Yeah.
nonprofit leaders or parents or pastors, that's my sweet spot, is speaking to young people, because I'm just so used to like talking about the next generation and translating to older people.
Yeah.
Um, and so next week, yeah, will be to like college kids.
That's good. Yeah, you made me think, like, I realized probably in my 20s as I never had a safe place to fail. I never learned how to fail. And I think that's part of that responsibility. When we give younger people responsibility, we actually create a space to fail and then disciple, to go, okay, you didn't get it right this time. What can you do better? And like, and I think that's just fascinating. As you're talking, I'm like, man, that's really so true. And yeah, now and then seeking out. So yeah, how do you advise young people now? I mean, I know you say you mostly speak to older, but how do you advise younger people now of finding that, um, yeah, that one, yeah, to seek discipleship, but to, uh, yeah, actually find that place where they can grow and gain responsibility and learn and become that person they all want to be, but maybe not know how to.
You're saying, how do you find like what to look
Yeah.
for in someone?
Yeah, or no, actually, just yeah. What's your encouragement to young people when they want that, when they want to find discipleship? I think yeah, like you talk about your
Yeah,
message
yeah,
to older people. Yeah, what would be more as your message, folks, to older? I mean, to the younger.
yeah. To
Yeah.
young people, I mean, I usually would say, let's see. I mean, there's an age-old phrase that says for
Mhm.
what to look for in a young person you disciple is to look for, they'll say, a fat person.
Mhm.
And what that means is a faithful, available, teachable person.
Yeah.
So that's like from, like, I don't know if it's the 80s or the 70s, but it sounds like about that era to use the acronym. But
Right.
faithful, available, teachable, fat person. I would ask faithful, available, teachable, and I would add hungry. For me, in a generation where like you're just saturated with content and you just don't have to be hungry that much. Sometimes I feel like young people are coddled a lot. When you find someone who is very hungry, like they just are
Mhm.
driven. These are, I mean, I think Gary V is connecting with this new
Yeah.
group that has got the hunger, and I hope that more of those types could like be
Mhm.
discipled too in Christ and change the world through entrepreneurial stuff. I think that's
Mhm.
from God to create like that. But yeah, I would just add, if you are, you faithful? Do you follow through with what you
Mhm.
say? One of the
Yeah.
things that bother me the most about the next generation is their yes is not always their yes and their no is not their no. When I say next generation, I still don't mean like people my age, just like
Right.
something about like when you're young, you just, I don't know, you feel like your word doesn't matter that much or something.
Mhm.
You just will say you're going to be somewhere and then not show up at all, and not even tell them you're not showing up, or you'll back up last second. Or I just think young people who end up keeping their word will totally advance, especially if they're keeping their word to older people. They will totally advance what young people who don't. Because
Yeah.
if you don't, you're actually normal. That's unfortunate. How low the bar is you're normal if you
Mm.
don't keep your word. And that's actually the benefit. My advice to young people is like, what's great or terrible, but in a way, at least it's to advantage if you're young, is the bar is so low for the next generation that if you're good, you actually look great. Like that's how bad things are. Is like if you
Right.
just keep your word, it looks like you're a really good person. Instead of keeping your word is bad, that's actually normal. Or if you, so if you're actually great, you look incredible. You look like, you actually are a great leader, who you are hungry, you are
Mm.
faithful, you are teachable, you are available, you have honor. Like these things that are not normal among the next generation. You truly are great leader
Mhm.
in this generation, because so few are even good, let alone great. You look incredible. And
Yeah.
doors open for you. Older people recommend you, they endorse you. And the older people have the money, they have the wisdom, they have the influence, they have networks, they have the relationships. What young people, I feel like we have creativity, we have passion, we have time, we have the freedom to just go and move without a spouse or kids. And so, yeah, I think that the best thing young people can do with that freedom of time, which I think is the greatest thing they have in this short window where you don't have
Yeah.
to ask your parents for permission anymore, and you don't have to ask your wife for permission or your kids for
Right.
a babysitter. You can just go.
Just
I think
go
the
and get
best
it
thing you
done.
can do is get mentored and get discipled, and especially not spend most of your life in your young single years with other young singles alone.
Mhm.
What I mean is like that's
Yeah.
all you
That's
hang
great.
out with. Like just waste your
Yeah.
time with others your age. Yeah, and the world will tell you, the enemy will tell you, your friends will tell you, honestly, this is the time to live it up. This is the time to
Mhm.
do it, and then mature later and when you get married. But I
Mhm.
can't tell you how many friends waste their single years not setting up their married years, and then
Yeah.
they want to pursue real passions and their goals when they're married. But you know
Mhm.
how hard it is when to do that, when you can't just decide for yourself. You have to decide as we. So
Mhm.
you can't just say yes to everything. You have to run it by your spouse. And when you have kids, you have to say no to even more things. And so
Mm.
it's not to say that marriage is bad, or that kids are bad. It's just to say like those are beautiful, life-giving things that do take a cost of time. And
Yeah.
so the
Sacrifice.
ideal situation is to, I would just say like, trying to think of the right word, more than just leverage. It's like I would squeeze everything out of your single years so that it sets you up to the best of your ability, and for the kingdom in your married years and in your years where you have kids, so that those things aren't ever a distraction or hindrance to the mission of God or your
Mm.
life calling, but they actually are an addition. They are a support.
Yeah.
But if you try to all you do is hang out and have fun with other young people, and yeah, you find yourself at some point being like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And I see a
Mm,
lot of people in their 30s where they're like stuck because they just have to make money at this point. So they just take whatever job they can to make money. And it's soul. It's kind of a death to the soul in some ways.
yeah. 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 It's like they're waiting for something to happen versus going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yes. So what, yeah. So what, how did you, I mean, was there someone, how did that get embedded into you of being faithful, showing up, being true to your word? What was something that, was there a person that kind of embedded that in you? Is there something that you just kind of took by observing others? What, how, where did that, you feel like that was embedded in you?
Um, I don't know. I don't
You
know
know,
what embedded in
it
me.
was just, I mean, family, was there somebody that really just kind of, or is it just like, man, this is just part of your personality that you're someone who shows up?
Yeah. I mean, if God, I would love like, yeah, if God can reveal how maybe it was potentially family. I can
Hmm.
nothing comes to mind that where I'm like, oh, this is from my parents, this is from my upbringing. I do feel like maybe it is more personality, but
Hmm.
maybe it is my family. Maybe I thought I'd get in trouble if I didn't follow through with my family. And because the first time I noticed that that wasn't normal was my very first job was at Marshall's when I was 16, because I just loved that clothing store. And I remember there, at least my manager at that place in Dallas was very particular, like when closing, like, hey, you got to put the hangers like this much apart. Like if it's 15 hangers, then find out how you make them equally separated. Or if it's 7
Yeah.
hangers, then separate them equally. Like, but just always like every hanger, making it look like it was very orchestrated and organized. And I was like, okay, that's my first job. That's what she said we got to do. That's what this just is what we do.
Hmm.
And I think there were other people that are a little older, but still my age was still like a little older, that we kind of were like, I think I could just, some would be totally not doing that at all. They put the hangers on, but that's it. They just put the clothes on the rack. And then the others would be like watching me go slower than them because I was actually doing it. And I was like, this is what they said we had to do. And I think that was the first time I noticed, like, dude, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. And me, I guess, having to decide, am I just going to go faster and not do it and like clearly decide I'm not going to do what she says, or am I going to do it? And honestly, yeah, I do think it's personality because I remember thinking it would bother me if I didn't do it
Yeah.
the right way. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not like a rule follower. I just like, I think it's more that I want things to look good.
Hmm.
And it's almost like, and I barely have to give a little bit more effort in order to make it look a lot better. Like
Yeah.
with 10% more effort, it looks like 100% better. It just kind of felt right. And so
Yeah.
that was literally when I realized you only have to be good to look great. Because I think others would act like, oh, you're wasting your time and it's not even going to matter. But I felt like I got advanced a lot more at a young age because I
Mhm.
just did, that point was like just did what they asked, let alone when you go over and above. Is a real, I think, door opener.
Yeah. Huh. That's cool. Yeah. Huh. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, because there was something embedded in me, I guess, when I was probably my dad. I mean, because my dad, he just, it's like you show up. If you want to be a friend, you want to be in a relationship with people, you show up. You got a job, you make this commitment, you show up. Yeah. But now,
It's
yeah, I
good.
mean, yeah, it was just interesting that's the way my mind worked. I was the same way, but like it just somewhere along the lines, like people thought differently, and you're like, wait, what? How come you didn't call in and say you weren't coming? But
Yeah.
uh anyway, yeah. So I mean, so yeah, in your 20s, it seems like you also had this like creative uh push against the norm. Like, I mean, even just standing up your first speaking opportunity, you got up there and were direct. Like, this is reality. This is what's happening. This is what God's calling us to, and we're not doing it. Yeah. Where do you feel
Yeah.
like, that was implemented in you, where you did feel the freedom to, one, to leave college and kind of start your own, felt the courage to leave college, do your own thing, and really build something that was a huge need. But I don't know if you researched that, but there weren't a lot of models for what you were doing. And yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah. I think for speaking though, one of the areas, yeah, I really do feel like I stumbled into a lot. I do think I was good at discerning when I felt like God was showing a gap, and then I would create something for it, and then later it would make sense how that was like preparing. And so, for example, um, two things. One's like literally happened yesterday, and one is then to prepare me for speaking. So I didn't just go up on the 20, it was like November 2014, and just know how to speak well. And I still was a little bit nervous, but I definitely had a little bit more confidence, a lot more confidence than I would have if it wasn't for this. Is when I was like, that was 24 years old, when I was like 19 and in college, I noticed like 15, 20 of my friends at school were going to school to be a pastor. And part of that was speaking. We learned, you could learn getting in the word, you could learn like church history, you could learn theology. But I felt like the only way you could really learn how to speak is by speaking. But the only time we were ever going to speak was like maybe to a youth group. And even that was pretty rare for us in college to be asked to do that. And so I saw this quote, sorry, ironically, it's funny, like full circle, ironically by Tim Keller. And Tim has this quote where he said, no matter what you do, your first 200 sermons are going to be terrible. And I remember thinking like, dang, that stinks. Like, you just got to get reps. Because I had respect for him as a speaker and thought, okay, yeah, what is he going to say? It is. And he's just like, it doesn't even matter if you have a gift or whatever. It's basically saying like, you just got to get 200 reps. And I know he wouldn't like down the hill, it's got to be 200 times exactly. But the point was, you got to get a lot of reps. And so my thinking was, I don't want to start getting reps once I become a pastor and then I'm getting reps, or even with youth. I want to like get reps when it doesn't even matter. Like, I'm just learning and I'm growing. Like, if I was getting reps to work out, I would just go to the gym and do it. But it's a little harder to just speak, and I don't want to speak to a wall or to a mirror. And so I got some friends together, because I said I had 15 to 20 friends that want to be a pastor, and I just said, what do y'all think about us getting together like twice a month to speak in front of each other, and we'll like give each other feedback. And I called it the call, and it was basically like about 15 of us would get together, speak for about 10 minutes, and before we went up, we would pick two people that were people we respected or were our friends, or just of the other people that were there. So it was definitely horizontal. It was like peers giving others feedback, and we would speak for 10 minutes, and then those two people that we let know beforehand, hey, I want you to give me feedback after, would spend, if it was 10 minutes of speaking, there was like 5 to 7 minutes of feedback from those two guys. And that was really, really helpful. I mean, they would look for content delivery, and authenticity was the thing. Like, content, of course, like if what you taught was good and actually like true or biblical, made sense. Two would be delivery, like, yeah, just was it compelling? And then three was pretty big too, especially when you're young, is authenticity. Like, did that actually even feel like it was you, or are you trying to sound like Matt Chandler? Because like that was like, you could tell who people were. You trying to sound like Stephen Furtick or TD Jakes. Like, it was always Francis Chan, like the big pass. Mark Driscoll was big at that time, so you could like tell who people listened to and who they were trying to sound like. But it's like, yeah, are you finding it? So I feel like that's you, because I know you, and that doesn't really sound like you.
They
And
would give
so
that feedback. I mean, they really
right
would. You
there in
were
front
being
of everyone.
authentic.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah, I mean,
awesome.
luckily we were friends, and it was a private space, so it wasn't like we were being recorded
Wow.
in front of each other. But that was where we got a lot of reps. So we did that for maybe 2 years, and eventually, after a couple months, we did say, okay, we feel more confident speaking in front of each other. Let's bring some pastors in that are actual preachers to give us feedback, and let's bring an audience in. And so we'd bring in like 30 people, maybe 40, and in front of pastors, and they'd give us feedback. And yeah, it's kind of cool to think about that now, but that gave us a lot more confidence speaking. So I'm not saying when I went up there on that panel, I knew I was going to ace it in any way, but I didn't, so much of speaking and so many lessons you can learn from becoming a better communicator help with just identity stuff. Because I say 90% of the fear of speaking has nothing to do with your ability to speak. It has everything to do with your concern for what other people think about you,
Absolutely.
and you're concerned for like coming off in a way that is impressive to others. It's a concern for things that aren't what we're supposed to be concerned about. And once you can overcome that battle in your mind, I think it helps a lot with I don't know, that's a big part of identity too, is like we live a lot of our life, not even just speaking, just our life concerned about what other people think about you. But once
Mm.
you break through the freedom of that, you get the ability to be, I would say a line I use a lot is you become confident in who you are and comfortable with who you're not. And that is what I learned a lot in speaking. So when I went up, I was pretty confident, at least in who I was, comfortable with who I wasn't.
Mm.
So that then I could actually focus on the main thing, which was the content of what God is calling me to say, and the hearts of those people that were supposed to hear it, instead of so focused on I'm nervous, which 9 times out of 10, we're not nervous because we're nervous about the content we're going to share. We're nervous because we maybe didn't prepare, or mostly we care what other people think. We're worried about how we're going to come off. We're worried about if we're going to say it the way we planned on saying it. So like even the question you sent me the question for, I don't like seeing questions for, which I'm fine. Everyone does send them.
Yeah.
Most people like seeing them. I don't like seeing it because then I
Oh,
think about what I could say or would say. I like just
yeah,
being
that's
like,
good.
I'm just gonna see what. Like, I mean, I feel like if it's in me, it's gonna come out, and yeah, if it's
Yeah,
not, I'll just tell you like I don't know the answer to that question.
that's good. Dude, there was some juice on that. That's totally, the more I have communicated in front of the room, the more I've discovered about myself. And I
Yeah,
had to continually to fight to rest in who God made me to be, who I am. And that's really cool. So we're kind of coming to the end. I got two more questions. One is, yeah, what do you feel like God's put in you that has led you to who you are today and what you're doing?
what has God put in me that's led me to today? I
Yeah.
would just say quickly, somewhat quick, is probably one of the biggest things I don't think people know about me, that it's just because this tends to be a more private thing that we do, that I think is a huge contribution to where I am today and what's in me, is I'd say prayer is I think that I think the act of prayer is a distinguishing feature of anyone that truly regularly prays. Just has a different level of intimacy with God,
Mm.
has a unique amount of stories that they can tell where God just shows up. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and just has, I would even say, out of that intimacy with God, they have a confidence in self, because like they just know God and they know God knows them, and especially they know they trust God, and that God they trust designed them. And so like out of prayer is a lot of Leonard Ravenhill, who's like an old revivalist, said, no man who is intimate with God will ever be intimidated by man. And I think that yeah, prayer is something at around 19, 20 years old, um, I really started seeing the power of. Part of it was through, a big part actually, like a turning point for me was, let's see, during that nonprofit when I was in college and we were doing this nonprofit, we would help churches do local mission projects. And there was like 50, there was a church called the Village Church, which is Matt Chandler's church, in Dallas, that was such a big deal because at this young age, their youth group was doing this big weekend called Spend Weekend, which is like their D-Now weekend basically. And they asked if we would be willing to help them get service projects, so on their weekend, that during parts of the weekend they're going to go and serve the community. And we had put in months of work to get work with the city government to find out what are needs in the city of Louisville, and they identified a neighborhood, and we knocked on doors weeks and months ahead of time to get to know the neighbors, see would they willing to receive help. Sometimes it's hard to even say, hey, can we help you for free? Like there seems to be like they think there's a catch. And so just building the relationship with this city and this neighborhood specifically, and had about 50 plus projects that these high school and middle school students were going to help with. And I guess where the prayer piece comes in is, it was about 2 days before we were having a final meeting, and everything was working out, everything was great, until we realized some massive part of the story, or part of the planning at least, was missing. Is for some reason we thought that the village pastors had worked out transportation for getting all their young there were 500, 600 young people to the location, which is only about 10 or 15 minutes away, but they can't drive. And they had 500, 600 people, and they had no transportation. And they thought that we had worked out transportation for all those kids. And so we were like scrambling, thinking,
Yeah.
we don't know how we're going to get 500, 600 kids to this area. And yeah, so much is working out for this thing, but this one thing of like, we've got to find a way to get all these kids. And I mean, we don't have money. They had spent all, they're already over budget on theirs. We had no budget on us. And it was going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars if we were to go, like, let's get them buses. So the best idea after about an hour and a half, 2 hours of planning was we were like, let's get 90, it was like 90 to 100 people can volunteer their car and drive these kids, which was going to be, again, 2 days before, it was going to be a logistical nightmare, because then we'd have to get 90 to 100 people. We're going to have to recruit them to say, yes, I'll drive my car, and I'll be there at this time, and get the kids over there. Then we'd have to get hundreds of kids to sign a waiver that they could do that, probably, and just all this stuff. And it was like just adding up. It's we're like, oh my gosh, this next 2 days is going to suck, as we have to do all this to try to fix this problem. And after, again, an hour and a half of planning, that was our plan. As we were going back and forth, what can we do? And there was a guy to the left of me, and there's about 5 of us at this meeting at Starbucks. And there was a guy to the left of me with his headphones in, and he takes out his headphones and he says, "Hey, can I say something to you guys?" And we're like, and he said again, like, hey, excuse me, can I say something? And as he takes out his headphones, he's like, "Hey, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I've been actually listening to y'all's conversation, and it's really ironic. It sounds like you guys have a transportation problem. I'm hearing y'all talk about having to get a whole bunch of kids to go do some service project. And what's crazy is I actually just moved here to Dallas." And he said, "I moved here because I bought actually a bus company." And he was like, "I bought a bus company, and you know what? I want to help you guys. It sounds like you're doing a good thing." And he says, "Tell me how many buses you need and when you need them by, and I got you guys. Like, you don't worry about it. I got it fully covered." And one of the pastors like hit me on my back. He's like, "See, Grant, I told you God has cattle on 1,000 hills." And it was just like this praise God moment where it was like, man, he showed up. And even now, thinking about that story is crazy. And I remember that night I shared that story about God showing up in that way. And it was crazy to see not just God, Christians celebrate God showing up in such a personal way, but seeing non-Christians even that were like kind of cynical towards my faith and critical, being like, "Hey, this is incredible." And I thought, like, man, those acts of God can so just move people. And I thought, man, I should just pray more, because like we just spent an hour and a half to 2 hours trying to make a plan and build our plans. Or I could just surrender to God, and there's ways that he can like just show up in unique ways. And I would say he didn't even just show up, he like showed off in a major way. And what's crazy even on that story is like that guy, when we told him the address, he's like, "So where do I deliver the buses? Where do I get them?" Two things were crazy. One was he didn't just bring buses. They weren't just like yellow buses. They were like for the NFL football teams. They were like nice buses with like watching a movie like Lion King on the way there. And then two, we told him the address. It was like some 4,200, some like Justin Road or whatever. And he says, "Wait, is that the village church?" And we're like, "Yeah, it is." And he said, "Man, my wife just dragged me to this church last week. Again, we've only lived here for 2 weeks, but she made me go to church with her. And we just went to that church." And I was like, man, the unique nature of God and the personal nature of saying like, "I see you." And for his story too, I just thought, man, what if instead of like seeing a problem, responding to this problem, like, what can I do? What can I solve? Like, how can I muster up the strength to do this? Is like regularly giving it back to God. And seeing, I just think there's an ease from that.
Yeah.
and a surrender to that. And if you truly trust that he's a good father, like, and that he's the creator of the universe, there's like some confidence that comes out of that as
Mm.
we give it to him. And so yeah, I really would say a lot of my life looks very strategic, but I do feel like I'm more stumbling into it. And when he
Mm.
gives me clarity, I work hard. So it's
Yes.
not don't do anything and just pray. It's
Mhm.
like start with prayer, bathe things in prayer, go back to prayer even in the midst of the work.
Yeah,
But when he gives clarity, like work and give everything for him. And then it starts to really fall into place.
man. Yeah, I love telling my guys, like, would you rather have a life based on what you can do or what he can do? And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what prayer. So, yeah. So anyway, had a question off of that. Then I'm just curious. So, what does your prayer life look like?
It's a good question because I guess I don't like actually I need to like write down what does it practically look like.
Yeah.
So but I do feel like by the grace of God, when I
Mm.
see the people complain a lot about like pray without ceasing. Now I actually was like that helps actually that makes sense. I didn't feel like I heard that and then did it. I felt like oh that makes sense. That feels like what I'm doing. Now I don't pray every so without ceasing makes it feel like even right now as I'm talking to you I'm praying to God.
Yeah.
But I will say I'm always talking to God throughout the day. Like I feel like if I had a closest friend who knows me well, it is him, and I can talk to him at any point. And not only that, I can, and I get a knock on his door and see if he'll answer. Like I feel like he wants to talk to me, and I say all that to say, like I, yeah, I mean, I do think having this idea that God is for you, God is like proud of you, God is Son has taken the guilt off of us and given us the freedom to like yeah it's like we're knocking on if you didn't have a relationship with the president then yeah you wouldn't want to just go knock on the White House's door, but like if you did know him then you would feel a little more confidence like hey I think he'll answer if he's not busy, and if he's your dad you know you could just walk in and he's not
Yeah.
gonna be mad.
There's no
And
knock,
so
no what, no ever. Just walk on.
yeah, like everyone's gonna know who you are too. Like
No.
you're his kid.
Mm.
He yeah, he's got it's not to say he doesn't have other things going on. It's just to say like especially God. I mean, this guy can handle your stuff
Mhm.
and everybody else's. And
Yeah.
so yeah, just having a good mentality of what how I can access him. And then probably one of the biggest and best prayers that I probably adopted several years ago is that I feel like helps me with striving or just wasting time is just a simple question of bless or block.
Mhm.
Is just simply like at all time at many times in our life there's these big decisions we have to make of like should I do this thing, should I date this person, should I take this job, should I leave this job, should I leave this church, should I
Mhm.
start this new business idea, should I like what should I be doing? It's got to be the number one question we ask God is like, God, what do you want me to do? I would go, I mean, ironically, Henry Blackaby, where we met, is like, just
Mhm.
look where God's already moving. It might be small, but it's just like he seems to be moving here.
Yeah.
Join him in that work. And then ask God, will you bless this if this is of you, or will you block it if it's not of you? Or you really want to do it, like you really trust him, like God, I don't want to waste my time. I don't even want to waste a day doing stuff out of my own strength and my own energy, or just something that looks good. It is even could be said it's for you, but it's just not what you called me to do. Um, and so I will like, say, hey, will you bless it in such a way that it's so clear it's you? And that's just
Mhm.
I'm gonna continue to walk regularly in that. Or will you block it in such a way it's clear it's not of you? And after a while, I do feel like through prayer, you start to sense like this is something I'm doing out of my own strength, or this is something I just feel like
Mhm.
God's doing. And the beauty of when it's something God's doing is sometimes he will thrust. I mean, we often think God moves slowly, but sometimes he moves actually really fast when he
Mhm.
blesses something and he thrusts you through a door you don't feel like you're ready for. And if it's of him, well, great thing is I don't feel this crazy pressure that I would feel if I was trying to do it in my own strength. And then two, when things get difficult on the other side of that door, if you will, is he as he thrusts us through it, big responsibilities or things he's like, man, I don't know I'd move at this pace towards this thing. But if it is from God, you can tell his fingerprints are all over it. when it's on the other side, and it will be difficult and it will have trouble sometimes, at least you can go back to God and say, God, you got me here. You wanted me here. I didn't even technically want to be here, not this fast. I didn't feel ready, but you thought I was ready. And so will you provide what is necessary in me, through me, for this? And I've noticed that God has a knack for showing up whenever he started it. And so
Yeah.
those are little principles I think I have around prayer is talking to him regularly. He wants to talk to me,
Yeah.
bless or block, so I'm not wasting my time.
Mhm.
And then the relief, actually, the light burden that it should mostly be when we're following Christ, where it's like there is trouble, it is somehow fun, and somehow it's a light burden because it's not on our shoulders, it's on his. And so it's like yeah, it feels somehow fun to follow God
Yeah,
even in the midst of difficulty.
absolutely. That's good. Yeah, I mean, I really want to ask that question because I just know so many people. I know people that, around our age. It's just this idea of prayer is so formal. It's so, it's like it's a more of a religious practice than it is actually just communing with the creator. And just like I get to actually have full access because of Jesus to him, just to talk, to listen,
Yeah,
to be. I can just be. I can. That's another thing. It's like the whole. It's such a performance thing that it's another thing for me to perform for versus me just showing up and being me. That's just something so cool. So yeah, thank
yeah.
you for sharing that, Grant. That was good. Yeah. So my last question, just give us an update. What you're doing, where people can find you. Any information you'd love to just share with my audience about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what you could pray for me is I do have a heart to find, unite, and develop some of the most diverse, dynamic young Christian leaders across the nation. And so
Mm-hmm.
that God, I mean, Luke 10 says, as you send out the laborers, it said, and pray for more laborers, for the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And so
Yeah.
just praying, would God raise up more laborers in the next generation? And I would say more laborers for the next generation. So it's not like the next generation is the hope of the future and they're the solution. It's also especially other laborers that started to have this conviction and this inspiration, like what can we do for the next generation to get them to reach more of their next generation, because we got the most lost generation, at least that our nation has ever seen. And then where you can find me, I mean, grantskeldon.com is my website, at Grant Skeldon is my Instagram. I don't check Twitter but like once a quarter, but that is my
For your
Twitter.
sanity, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything luckily is around my name, just Grant Skeldon. It's Skeldon.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on. This is a blast talking to you. So
Yeah, man. Absolutely, dude. Thank you for having me.
absolutely.